Hello, guys. Welcome. Thank you ever so much for joining us again. As you can see, Kamran Pasha has kindly joined me again because of the shenanigans that went on Sunday. Um, he has agreed to come back to finish this awesome conversation that we were having. I know you guys have sent us some really cool questions as well, so we will cover those in a little bit. But let's jump straight back into it. Cameron, how are you doing?
I'm great, Valkyrie, and I'm excited to be back on. And I only regret that we don't have your chat with us right now because they were such a wonderful group that was interacting with us. But considering the strange events that happened last time, I just want to get through their questions and hopefully we'll be able to interact with them in the future.
Absolutely. It was very strange, but it was kind of funny at the same time, but also kind of an eye opener. Um, so
Well,
we will bear that in mind.
it fit in the theme of what we had been talking about my own experiences in industry, that whenever I started getting a little bit of attention, strange things would start happening, like my cell phone being broken into and other events. So it's a strange world that we live in.
It really is, absolutely. Um, Before we unfortunately had to cut it off the last time, we were talking about companies. So large companies such as Disney, Lucasfilm, and basically whenever the fans tell them that they don't like what they're doing, there's a lot of backlash, and there seems to be a lot of antagonistic behaviour coming from those sort of companies. Do you think that's a pattern that's forming at the moment?
Well, it's a pattern that we've experienced in the last decade, and it's a strange pattern because you know I've been in the town for 20 years, and it wasn't how things were when I first arrived in 2001. It was more rational, which is that they understood that the fans are your customer base, and PR departments all existed to try to make sure to try to solve crises whenever there was a miscommunication or whether there was in a public outrage over something. That was the purpose of PR departments. I mean, and it goes back to practical common sense, is that you want to keep your market happy, you want to adjust to your customers. That's ancient traders and ancient Assyria and Babylon
It
understood
really
that.
is.
I mean, this is human nature. If you want somebody to sell something to somebody, you got to keep them happy, right? You got to give them what they
Hmm.
want. It's
Yes.
basic human interaction. But in the last several years, really in the last decade, and it accelerated really in the last 4 to 5 years, I've watched this strange trend of the industry. Instead of reacting and adjusting to the customer's response, they
Hmm.
start lecturing and hectoring the customer, which made no sense to me and doesn't objectively make any sense. Yet it what was happening, and I think part of it is, I've said this before, that what we're witnessing is a phenomenon that the ancient Chinese actually had a parable about. The Chinese have a saying that wealth is created and lost in 3 generations. The idea is that
Hmm.
the first generation is the entrepreneurial generation. It creates the wealth. It's usually people with nothing who are struggling to make something of themselves, and they create the wealth. The second generation is then the one that manages that wealth. I mean, they've grown up with not the same kind of struggles that the previous generation did, but they're still trying to expand on the foundation that was established, and so they're still trying to figure out ways to make money and solidify their own power. The third generation squanders the wealth. So the third
Right.
generation has built on top of the first two, and no longer has that sense of entrepreneurialism, that sense of risk taking, that sense of responsiveness to the world. And we're witnessing that right now. If you think about it, we really are going through the 3 generations of Hollywood. Hollywood was founded a century ago, uh, by essentially, entrepreneurs coming from the East Coast, from New York City, who had been locked out of the Broadway world, and they were essentially shoe salesmen who moved to what was then a really empty wilderness area, Los Angeles, and decided we're going to be free of the New York society. We're going to create our own entertainment world here, and they founded
Mm.
the silent film Hollywood. And so that was, and they did all this remarkable stuff. And some of those original silent films, you watch them, are like they're better than anything being made today, right? And because it was just all risk taking and trying to figure out what the market wanted. And they actually did a lot of very religious films because they understood most Americans were religious, and so they would make Bible movies. And the first Ten Commandments was a silent movie, right? And it was incredible special effects by Cecil DeMille in like the 1920s. And so that's the first generation, and that was very responsive to the customer because these people were literally shoe salesmen who were moved out to a desert here, and like, what do we do? How do we make money? So second generation is what we call the golden age of Hollywood, right? Which is really essentially from the 40s through the early 70s, right? Which is Casablanca and all that classic era. We have sound and music and all of this stuff, and and color movies and all that. And that's when some of the great movies like Lawrence of Arabia and others are being made. And this is people that want to build on that first generation, and now they're thinking in terms of awards, because that's really a second generation thing, right? Oscar is really something that comes second generation. They want to get the accolades and build that. The third generation is what we're experiencing now, which it's sort of the end of that third generation. The third generation really began, with the 70s filmmaking, which was all the experimental stuff and George Lucas and all of that, right? And so then it created the blockbuster as a third generation phenomenon. And so now we're getting to the end of that period where you've got people in Hollywood who are essentially just young kids. I mean, a lot of times the executives I'm working for are 25, 26 years old, like right out of school. They have, and it's always a family connection that got them this job and working as executive at the studio. Like, how does a 24-year-old kid suddenly have power in a studio, right?
How does that work? Yeah.
It's real because their uncle runs the studio, right? And their uncle is the grandson of the person that founded the studio, right? So it's a familial thing, and that's how it works. And so these people have been raised with a sense of their own specialness. I'm part of the family of the industry, and so
born into it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so they come in with this arrogance that has been insulated by two generations of disconnect from the audience, and so suddenly you start seeing these people decide that they are essentially prophets for the world, right? Because they haven't built up anything. And so they're going to now teach the ignorant masses whatever truth they think is true. And so that's the phenomenon I started watching in the last decade, and accelerated. Again, I don't need to get political, but when certain election events happened in 2016 in the United States, shocked Hollywood because it wasn't the way that Hollywood assumed it was going to go. And, and so people decided that their job was to save humanity from the evil direction that it was now going in under a certain new gentleman, right? And they decided to get on their soapboxes. And they responded to criticisms they didn't see criticism as customers expressing dissatisfaction. They saw criticism as part of an ideology that's attempting to spread fascism through the world, or whatever it is they imagine, right? And so they started seeing critics as an ideological enemy. And because they believed they were on the side of history, on the side of righteousness, they could not believe that the critics would actually align with where their customer base was. Mm-hmm. They couldn't, because they are morally righteous and their customers would have to be like them, right? And so that is why places like Lucasfilm in particular decided that they could just say, you had Miss Kennedy saying in New York Times interviews, "I'm not making Star Wars for old white men." Mm-hmm. There's a buying everything. I don't know who you're making it for, that because they're the ones buying all the toys. But whatever, okay. It's not those kids aren't buying the toys; they don't know about it, right? It's Star Wars has been off the air for 20 years, and it was the parents that were buying the EU books, right? And so so it's not, a generation had been raised with Star Wars since the sequel trilogy ended and the prequel trilogy ended in the early 90s, and so but again they view themselves as prophets and seers, and so they weren't interested in feedback from the world. They're interested in giving the world something, but it wasn't what their great grandparents had given them when founding the town, which was something that would inspire them and universal values and storytelling, because they themselves are disconnected from those values after several generations of wealth and largesse in America, in Hollywood. So that's the cultural phenomenon we're witnessing here. But of course, practical things, once you don't give the customer what it wants, it goes away, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what happened.
I mean,
so now they're reacting.
Oh, sorry, carry on.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've worked in catering, I've worked in retail, and we were always told the customer is always right. That's just something that came with it. Would it be fair to say that the Hollywood bubble, as we call it, is a real thing then? They're so kind of in this environment all the time that once they did get this pushback from fans that they didn't expect, that's why it came as such a shock to them.
Well, Hollywood is absolutely a bubble. I mean, it has become, like I said, it has become a smaller and smaller bubble over the generations, right? And now we're at a stage where they're completely disconnected from reality. Again, these people don't actually live the lives that they're talking about. They're all talking about these progressive social values, and we've got to raise up minorities, and we have to raise up women, and that's not how they actually run things here, right? This is a racist, sexist world that we're in, right? And it's a very ruthless world of these people all backstabbing each other and try to steal from each other, and anything they perceive as weakness or being out of the club is easy game for attack. So if you're a minority, you're seen as not in the club, easy game to attack. If you're a woman, you're seen as not in the club. Well, if you're a woman outside of the families, right? Outside of the protected families, then you're seen as an easy, because you don't have the network to protect you. It's like a mafia, right? If you don't have mafia protection, somebody
You're
pulls up
on
your
your
house
own.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's how it is. So the idea that that they understand the market, they don't. I mean, we're living in a fantasy world here, but then it's a fantasy world built on all this virtue signaling, where they have to proclaim themselves to be these righteous people, right? Who are, by the ideals that they've held out to be righteous, even though they're not actually living them. Whenever I come across anyone in Hollywood that starts talking about, minority rights, LGBT rights, and that stuff, I get very, very suspicious, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm like, okay, here, I just live my life by treating people with dignity. I don't just ever talk about it, right? I
Yeah,
never have to
you
say,
do.
I have to
Yes.
help this person because XYZ, they're this category. I help someone because they're a human being. And if someone is from a community that isn't have power, and it's someone I like, I want to help them, right? And because I
Hmm.
like them and I want them to advance out of the limitations that they're in, I never talk about it.
No.
And so when you start talking about it, that's immediate signal that you're not that person, right? And you're virtue signaling, and you're virtue signaling to other members of the mafia. Hey, I'm saying all the right stuff. I'm part of you, right? And so I get real nervous when I hear someone talking about how righteous they are and how they want to use entertainment for these righteous agendas, because that's not their goal.
Yes, that does seem to be the way of it as well. Everybody, especially on Twitter, when you see celebrities, they're all singing from the same hymn sheet, and it does make you wonder. Are these people genuine in their concern for minorities, for LGBTQ, or are they just saying this because that's what they know people want to hear?
Well, I think that most of them are unself-aware,
Mm.
because it's a culture. When the whole idea of a culture is you act without realizing it, right? That's what a culture is. You're just so immersed in what everyone else is doing, you're following it, right? You don't even question it. So that's the culture of Hollywood. The culture of Hollywood is hypocrisy. It is all, it's all pretending to get along with people in order to advance yourself. And so part of that is saying whatever everyone else is saying, right? But most people are purely about how to advance themselves, and they're only seeking. This is the thing that I think is very shocking to people. It's shocking to young writers who show up here, because especially writers want to actually tell a story, right? They actually want to tell a story, at least you would think they.
Yes.
So they show up here and then they go through this journey that I've been through, and you're like, well, nobody here wants to tell a story. The people here, they want three things: they want wealth, power, and sex, right? Those are the three things they want, and Hollywood is used to achieve those things, right? And so, if your script can help them achieve wealth, power, and sex, they will facilitate it. That's it. That's what the industry is. I wish I was even exaggerating. I wish I was.
No,
When you
I
meet these characters, like,
completely
is
believe
this a
that.
cartoon? Is this like a Bugs Bunny cartoon? Are you for real? Are you actually a real person? But that's how they are.
I completely believe
Yeah,
that.
I have to
Honestly,
laugh
I
at it
do.
because it's so crazy. When you meet these people, you're sitting in a room and you're feeling skeeved out. Like, this can't be a real person. This can't be a real person. And he's my boss.
That's real. Oh my gosh. It's not an environment I don't think I would really particularly like to be in. I would agree. It's like stepping into a shark tank, it seems.
It is. And it's sharks that are unaware that they're sharks, right? So it's a strange world. I don't know why I'm still here 20 years later, but partly because I'm stubborn. I'm just stubborn because I'm definitely the kind of person they don't want here. I'm
Hmm.
a, I'm I'm not in the club. I'm a Pakistani Muslim guy. I'm socially conservative on many things. I'm very traditional on many things, right? I'm not politically aligned with them. I'm more of a libertarian. I believe in freedom, and they're not. For all their talk of liberalism, they're not about freedom. They're all about we're going to control what people think and say, right? And we've witnessed last year that that's what they're about, right? And so I'm not about those things. I'm like, even I'm believe in freedom. So if you don't agree with me, as long as we treat each other with dignity, great. You live your life differently than me, I'm going to let you do that as long as you're not bothering me or other people. I don't care, right?
Mhm.
That's not how they think. and that's why I have liberal friends and conservative friends. I have straight friends and gay friends. I just leave people alone. And they're like, no, they have categories, right? And you have to be in the category or you're out. And I've managed to somehow achieve at least a moderate level of success in 20 years. And that's so irritating for these people because I'm not going away and I should go away and I'm still here. And now I'm like publicly talking about these things, which is a real annoyance.
Yes, I can imagine that would really get under some people's skin. Absolutely. Because like
Yeah.
you
And
say,
then
you're
strange things
pretty
happen
much,
when I get
yeah,
under their skin. Strange things happen to video broadcasts when I get under their skin. So
absolutely. You're kind of like the antithesis of what they should want and should be kind of behind, but clearly because you don't walk to their beat, that's where problems arise. But
it is what it
my
is.
hat is off to you.
I will take. At this point, all I've got is hats, right? I mean, just because I'm fighting this, I don't even need arrows in my quiver. I just have hats at this point. remember one of those James Bond movies? You had, yeah. I think it was, you had the gentleman. I think it was in which one was it? Goldfinger,
Goldfinger,
where
yeah.
he had, I think the character's Odd Lot, where he had the hat and he would kill people with the hat. I'll take that.
Razor brim, yes,
Yes,
absolutely. That would be pretty awesome. Uh, actually, I can kind of see you pulling that off,
yeah.
definitely.
Hats are beginning to come back. They're beginning to come back. I like it.
Um, we touched on it briefly when you were talking
Yes.
about it. You said that the first generation were the innovators, and now that we're in this third generation, it's very clear to see that all companies and all properties they want to do is either remakes, sequels, or something like that. We don't really see anything new coming out. Is that also systematic of what's going on at the moment? Playing
Absolutely,
it
because
safe.
yeah, you're absolutely right, Valkyrie. They can't think in those terms. I mean,
Hmm.
why did Disney over the last decade just remake The Lion King and all this other stuff? I mean, for the Disney was the center of innovation of this industry for a century,
It
and they
was.
created the new technology. They created all the new stories. They tried things, and then suddenly we're like, wait, why are we doing Sleeping Beauty again? What?
Yes.
What's happening here? I mean, they get, and that's what happened to Star Wars. It's literally like, George Lucas hands them his treatment for trilogy. Like, what is this new crap? Let's go back to doing Star Wars with J.J. Abrams doing the same story, not as well, right? And so, it's and then unfortunately, if they just stuck to remaking the original George Lucas movies badly, that's fine, right?
Hmm.
But instead, they decided after this certain gentleman was elected, president of the United States, they decided, oh my God, we have to save the world from this evil ideology. Let's do that by subverting Star Wars and teaching them through the vehicle that's a global vehicle. And then they come up with The Last Jedi, and you're like, man, I wish I went back and just mimicked George Lucas. What is this crap?
Yes, people actually like The Force Awakens because it hit all the right nostalgia points with people.
That's all it was. And then they bring in this dude who's like, well, we've got to subvert the narrative that has brought us this guy in power and that's allowing all these races to run the world. And we're going to subvert. And it was like, that's great. The subversion. I started hearing that a year, about, again, a decade ago, 20 years ago. I never heard anyone say subvert expectations because it's a stupid idea. You expectations is the customer's desire. And so
Yeah.
what you want to do is you want to surprise them. You want to give them what they wanted in a way they didn't expect so that they're delighted, right? Subversion means you're going to take what they desire and break it because, purely out of this sort of childish, I broke your toy, right? That's
Yeah, out of
subversion.
spite.
Doing that in writers' rooms, I'm like, why are you saying this stuff? Why do you want to subvert the narrative? We want to surprise the narrative. That's a different energy. Subversion is by definition a negative word. Where it's like Darth Sidious. He comes in and he subverts a republic, right? And so whereas surprise is positive. The discovery that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father is surprise. It's not subverting the narrative. It's actually a logical development of the story when you're like, Luke is obsessed about his father, and it's because you're even in the second movie, Empire Strikes Back, why does he keep talking about his dad? We've never seen his dad, right? Why do we care about this dad? But it's his myth that's keeping going. My dad was a Jedi Knight. I gotta be like my dad. Oh my God, my dad is fallen, right? That's surprise. It's not subversion. It's the logical hidden direction of the story that reveals this wonderful surprise.
It is, and obviously with Luke, it's a hero's journey, and having that revelation, it almost stops him in his tracks, and then the hero has to rise again and take over, and come back from this enormous shock that the man he was desperately searching for and wanted to emulate turned out to be the biggest villain in the galaxy. So.
Absolutely, and then you realize at the end of the first Star Wars trilogy that wasn't Luke's story. The hero's journey is Darth Vader, right? It's Anakin's journey, and that's why the prequels then work, because you realize this was never about Luke. Luke is a facilitator of Anakin's story, right? And so that was the genius of George Lucas. It is a genius not shared by the third generation of Hollywood.
No, absolutely not. And it is sad because as you say, people have grown up with these films. They have, when there were no films, you mentioned the EU books, and I've recently started getting into reading the EU books, and there is such a depth of information and amazing characters to jump into that they could have.
Characters. You go deeper into Luke and Leia and Han and their humanity, and Luke falling in love. It wasn't even before Mara Jade. Luke actually had there was I think there was one book where there was a girl he liked, right, who ended up betraying him. She lied to him about who, she was going to lead him to his mother. This is before the sequel movies, the prequel movies had come out. And so we didn't know anything yet about who his mother really was. And this was a character shows up saying that she would tell him the truth about his mother and what happened. Maybe his mother might still be alive, right? And then at the end, you realize she's lying to him and manipulating him for her own agenda. And it's a girl that he really liked, and it breaks his heart, right? And so, and then later he meets Mara Jade. But, that's an incredible continuation of this character.
It is, and so much better than obviously what we got, which is why the fans are not happy.
We got subverted. We're at essentially the stage where the third generation member squanders the wealth, so we're squandering it right now. But what that does is it always creates a new cycle. So after the third generation destroys the grandparents' legacy, a new cycle begins. The grandparents founded Hollywood after their legacy had been destroyed in the 1800s through whatever their journey was, right? And away we go. Because a lot of these guys were, if you look at the founders of Hollywood, a lot of them were Eastern European immigrants, right? And they had escaped anti-Semitism. They'd escaped all kinds of bigotry and problems. Their families had been established in Europe in the 17 and 1800s, and that had been taken away from them in the 1800s. They fled to America, and they started new life all over. And, their grandparents might have been rich in Germany or Hungary or whatever, but now they were starting all over as shoe salesmen in Brooklyn, and the cycle began.
I was going to ask again, because obviously, Hollywood isn't what it used to be. Do you think there is going to be a resurgence? Do you think there is going to be another renaissance, if you will, of Hollywood? Or do you think it's going to have to completely burn to the ground and something rise again from it?
I think both are happening. I think part of it is burning to the ground as we speak, as we're watching, and even in the midst of that forest fire, new life is growing. Right? I am not of the view that the future is going to be people are going to make movies on YouTube. I think it's still the resources base will still require some kind of centralized, industry, which I still think is Hollywood. We certainly don't see China being that, and I don't think Bollywood is going to be that. Right? I think. No. Yeah, I think it's going to remain Hollywood because the talent is still here. What's going to be the process is rediscovering the talent as we rebuild a new industry, where because the third generation is just people are gravitating towards people like themselves. So this third generation of Hollywood executives and power players are people that are not talented, they're not entrepreneurial, and so guess what? They then gravitate towards hiring artists who are also those things, right? And so when those artists fail them, we watch things like Birds of Prey, where you have young director who was her previous movie had made something like $3,000 in it was it was a small movie that was made for nothing and literally only made like $3,000 or $4,000 in the box office, and then she's given $100 $100 movie, and she wasn't ready for that. And maybe
No.
in 10 years of steady growth, she would have been ready for it, but she wasn't. But that was an example. They saw someone who had the right creative vision of what they wanted or whatever, and and then, like themselves, who are 23-year-old executives who were given too much responsibility. They gave too much responsibility to somebody like themselves, right? And it blew up in their face. But we're watching James Gunn is bringing back the earlier version of Harley Quinn, in this The Suicide Squad. So they are learning.
Absolutely, and it seems quite a cruel thing to have done to her as well. Somebody who is so young to have just kind of thrown them in the deep end, and for me, it would have been
It's not fair. It's
just
not
shock.
fair. It wasn't fair to Kathy Wan. It wasn't fair to the director. I have no criticism as a director. She's obviously has talent, but look, I've been doing this for 20 years, and there's a lot of things that I was ready for 15 years ago that still haven't manifested, right? But the end process of that is that I really am very confident in my craft. After 20 years of this, I'm so confident. I was probably, when I was younger, I was very arrogant about my craft. Now I'm just like, I have a cool confidence. I know what I can do and what I can't do and what I'm good at and all of that. And so, but that took 2 decades. So that if today you gave me something like the next Star Wars movie, I could do it without like being overwhelmed. I'm like, okay, I've written dozens of scripts of that caliber that haven't been made yet, but I'm so used to it. So it just becomes like get up and make breakfast. You don't even think about it.
Yeah, I think obviously experience, confidence will come with it. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's what these executives, third generation, lack. They themselves don't have experience, right? And I remember reading a story about a very established Hollywood screenwriter, someone who'd been making like Oscar-winning movies in the 70s, that kind of thing, right? And he came in, he told a story about how he came in to do a meeting at Sony or one of the big studios, and his executive was somebody who's like 23, 24 years old. This guy's like in his 60s and with a long list of big movies, and the executive didn't know who he was. He was just taking a general meeting, and the executive had no idea what this guy had written, like these Oscar-winning movies. He didn't even know those movies, right? But this is, as he walks in, and the executive was like, so what have you done? So, and the guy, and he just looked at him, what have you done? And the writer just looked at him and goes, yeah, why don't you start first? You tell me what you've done. Because he hasn't done anything, right? But he's a 23-year-old executive running this part of the studio, right? It's like, well, you first. You tell me what you've done.
It shouldn't take long, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that is brilliant. A weird environment to walk into. But you mentioned obviously about your scripts, and obviously you have a huge body of work. We had a question in regards to that, if I may. So we had it from a gentleman called Bob Martin. He asks, on Midnight's Edge, you mentioned that you really love the film First Man about Neil Armstrong. With your work on science fiction, would you be interested in writing a screenplay on that era of space exploration? They've done movies on Mercury and Apollo programs, but never the Gemini program. He goes on to say it was filled with danger, humour, tragedy, and triumph, and in the right hands could make a compelling film. And he says that he thinks your neighbour, Ron Howard, had experience with that kind of film. So,
this person clearly listening to my YouTube videos, he knows a lot about me. But yes, I do live next to Ron Howard, which is strange enough. Well, that's a great question, and I want to say again, First Man is, in my opinion, one of the greatest movies ever made. It's a movie a lot of people didn't see. It's about Neil Armstrong and his private life and all the truths about his life that we didn't know. The man that first stepped on the moon, what a complex human being he was, and what a difficult family life he was going through. And so it's an incredible movie, and it's visually stunning and a great script. But yes, I am. I've written science fiction. Actually, one of the earliest scripts I wrote in this town was for Rob Cohen, who is a wonderful director. He directed the first Fast and the Furious, right? So he's been a mentor of mine. Rob is wonderful. And I wrote a science fiction movie based on an anime. The anime itself wasn't science fiction. It was set in sort of modern day Japan, and it always has these sort of young Lolita girls, like anime is how they work, right? And this young Lolita, an assassin working for this bad guy who's her handler, right? That was an anime. It was called Kite, and it is, let's just say the original anime. Let's just say the original anime is NC-17, as some of these are. So when I watch,
it's okay.
I'm gonna I'm gonna adapt this. Am I gonna go to jail for watching this? What is this thing that they gave me, right? But so I kite, and I adapted it. I said, you know what? Let's take this storyline and let's push it 300 years in the future and make this a science fiction thing, and tone down some of the NC-17 stuff, right? I don't think we need to have 13-year-old girls running around having sex. I was like, this is working in Japan. I don't know, it's not gonna work here, right? So let's take that out. And so I wrote this science fiction version of Kite, which ultimately never got filmed, which is a tragedy. It's one of my best scripts. And that was where I first met Rob. And Rob was like, who the hell are you, man? You're a great writer. And I was like, that was great praise coming from Rob Cohen, right? Again, one of these guys, he's a second generation guy. He's been around forever, done everything. He was an executive, and then he ended up becoming a director and became a very good director. So yes, I've written science fiction. I love the early space era. It's that first generation. It's that incredible, where people are just flying literally by the seat of their pants. And one of the reasons First Man is so brilliant is that it shows how dangerous this was. I mean, a lot of the cinematography focuses on the inside of the capsules, and you realize they're just literally nuts and bolts and barely held together by duct tape, and they're going to blast these people into outer space, right? It's insane. And there's actually a moment in First Man that is a moment I didn't know about, but it's the Gemini program where Neil Armstrong almost died on Gemini 8, where he was sent up, and it was the big moment where they were going to learn how to reconnect. They're going to basically how to dock in space. It had never been done before. Mm-hmm. Right? Russians hadn't done it. And the idea was, they had set up another rocket that was floating in the atmosphere, and he'd have to go up into orbit and actually find it somewhere around the planet, find it, number one, and then number two, actually dock without crashing and dying, right? And he pulled it off, but it went terribly wrong at the end, and he nearly died. And it's absolutely terrifying to watch that thing where they're spinning out of control in space, and they're like, and that's actually really happened. And Neil Armstrong's like, I don't think I'm going to be able to get back to Earth. I think we're dead. I think this is it, right? And he's desperately trying to survive. Gemini 8, all the Mercury programs, they're incredible. We had some of that obviously with The Right Stuff, which is a great movie. But I'd love to work on something like that, because that is pure crazy heroism. What we did with landing on the moon, and yes, I do believe we landed on the moon. I believe many conspiracy theorists do believe we landed on the moon, because for me it's very simple. While we could have faked one moon landing, we landed on the moon 6 times. Why fake it 6 times? You just fake it once, all you need. You don't need to fake it 6 times, right? You don't. And so yes, we landed on the moon, but I would love to do it, and it's the kind of human storytelling that I would love to do. But and I think we're going to get back to that again as people are realizing the future ain't that interesting. So let's go look at the past.
Absolutely, and so that is a really great kind of, because it's the human spirit, it's triumph over adversity, it's something that people can get behind as well.
Yeah,
and as you say,
I mean, I talked about another live stream. There is evidence. It's not clear, but there is evidence. The official narrative of history is that the first human being, the first man in space, was actually Yuri Gagarin, the Russian cosmonaut, with the orbit, right? It looks like he was the first man to survive and come back from space, because there's evidence that the Russians set up other people quietly, and they basically didn't come back. They just went out and like, oh, they're not in orbit. They're going to die in space. And there's evidence. There were even female cosmonauts were sent up there before Gagarin, and they died. And their bodies are floating out there, right? And so there's a lot to this story that I'd love to explore.
That would be amazing, and I could definitely see something like that coming back. I think that's exactly what people need at the moment. They need something to get behind. And with the space program, it halted for a very long time, but now obviously we're
third generation, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at third generation. First generation is Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, right? Second generation space shuttle, and third generation, we don't know what to do. Let's just give this rich guy some money, and maybe he'll figure it out. Right? I mean, literally, we don't know. I mean, it's amazing. The third generation they don't even have the plans to Saturn V rocket. They couldn't recreate it today. They threw the plans away, so they don't know how to get back to the moon. They have to figure it out all over again.
If we do pick up space exploration again, I absolutely believe it is going to be someone like Elon Musk that will be the one pushing it forward.
The entrepreneurs, right? So it's
the entrepreneur. Yep.
The entrepreneurs. It's the people who are trying risky stuff, right? So that's always when essentially NASA died, the next generation has begun. Same thing with Hollywood.
Absolutely. I have got a couple of questions also from Mexican Ironman. So what I would do is I'll read them out if that's okay, and then we'll we'll see what you think.
Will Mr. Iron Man be able to join us? I'd love to see him if he's able to go.
I did send him the link. It doesn't look like he's seen it just yet.
Okay. Well, we'll just
Unfortunately.
That's fine.
Okay. So let me. I'll read them out for you, if that's okay. So he says, "Dear Mr. Pasha, I have been a fan of your work for a long time. I just didn't know you were you when it comes to Bionic Woman, the early episodes of Sleep Sale, and others." So he says, question number one. Do you strongly believe that KK is on her way out of Disney, or what chances are there her contract might actually get renewed?
Well, I know this has recently caused a lot of unnecessary drama in the fandom. I've
Mm-hmm.
always held, and I've predicted this since The Last Jedi, that her reign would come to an end because of the reasons that I've explained the reasons why something like The Last Jedi happened, and the end result was financial loss for Disney. No matter all the drama we want to create inside the fandom over this, the practical reality is the bean counters know Disney has lost massively on an investment that should have been easy money. They know that, right? I work in the industry. Everybody knows that. The people I talk to, I know people that were up for the original Boba Fett movie that was being made that got canned and eventually transformed into The Mandalorian. I know
Mm-hmm.
writers that were up for that. I remember the day that the Solo movie premiered. This writing team I know that was up for that had already begun like working a writing room to do for the Boba Fett project said to me, "Yeah, Boba Fett's canceled. Solo killed it, right?" And it was all of it was going to be canceled until Jean Favreau came in and resurrected with the Mandalorian, right? But they told me directly the day, I mean, literally the weekend that happened on Monday, I talked to them and they're like, "Yeah, Solo bombed and we're out of a job, right? We were supposed to
Yeah,
be
I
working
did.
on." And that was all of it. They were cleaning everything out. So they know, and they saw, because they saw from Favreau what could be, that the official story that this is just the audience doesn't want this anymore. It's like the audience doesn't want garbage. Favreau
Mm-hmm.
gave them what they wanted, and they saw that. So to pretend that that is not happening is delusion. But the thing is this: Hollywood doesn't come out and say what I'm saying. Why am I a bit of a pariah? Because I come out and say what they're all saying privately. The same people who work on the Boba Fett project told me, yeah, Kathleen Kennedy don't know what she's doing, right? But they're never going to say that out loud, right? They just want their paycheck and survive, right? And wisely so, right? And so, yes, I believe Miss Kennedy is finished. I think that I believe that when Favreau established the Mandalorian and that the new way was what the audience wanted, and especially when Luke Skywalker returned to global acclaim, when Mark Hamill returned at the end of Mandalorian season 2 to global acclaim, Disney saw that. And then I think the writing was on the wall long before for her tenure to end. I think that was the thing. Like, all right, well, we need to make money now, especially after last year where Disney was hit more than the other studios because their parks were closed and their cruise ships were closed because of the events of last year. They needed to make money, and then the drama around Gina Carano was bad PR. And the moment Ms. Carano was let go, I said, this is it. This was a Hail Mary move by the third generation of young dumb people who didn't understand that their time was up, and so
Mm-hmm.
they put it over the edge. And so I've talked about this on Midnight's Edge in particular. Everything I predicted has happened. I predicted the Forbes article that come out that condemned Disney for firing Carano. I predicted that after that would come out articles in the trade talking about internal chaos in Disney. Articles in the trade came out in Hollywood Reporter saying that Bob Chapek is taking control, and he's all that. Everything I predicted has happened. None of that is being done publicly, and nor can it be, because it's all about saving people's face. Because somebody like Miss Kennedy, even if she's not liked, and I don't believe she's liked in Disney, even if she's not liked, you just don't need that person as an enemy. You know, that person has a lot of friends. Most importantly, has friends in the trades, right? So whether her relationship with, I don't think her relationship with George Lucas is good. I guessing her relationship with Spielberg probably isn't that great at this point after Indiana Jones, some of the choices she's made. So it's not that she's going to have powerful people like Steven Spielberg creating problems. That's not the problem.
Mm-hmm.
All these 25-year-old reporters at the Variety and the Hollywood Reporter who are looking up to her as this icon of feminist values as they think, okay, because they didn't see the feminism in the 60s, right? These are kids, right? So they don't know what feminism is, but they see this person
Again,
who's in
third
power.
wave. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. That's all they know, and they're all talking about identity politics, and They're waiting to write that article about how Hollywood is ganging up on the most powerful woman, right? Because it's a bunch of sexist white males, right? They're waiting to write that article. They're waiting to take out Bob Chapek with that because that's going to build their reputation as young 24-year-old journalists, right? And so that's the thing they're afraid of. They're afraid of her making a phone call saying these people are ganging up on me because I'm a woman, and they're finished. And I'm sure she has a safe full of stuff. And by the way, here's some photos from a party that they don't want you to know about, right? That's how Hollywood works. I wish that is how Hollywood works. There really is these eyes wide shut stuff going on behind the scenes, right? And everyone's got blackmailing each other. That's how it works. And I wish there was a reporter that was looking into some of this stuff a few years ago about let's just say the sexual exploits of some powerful studio people, and their brake lines were cut and they were killed in a car accident, just accidentally. It happens. That's the industry, right? That's always been. You study the Hollywood industry, they've been doing that for, people that cause problems for Clark Gable would have accidents in the 30s, right? And so that's how the town works, right? And so, yes, you can't do this stuff publicly. And that's why this recent drama in the fandom was really irritating, because it's a lot of people, in my opinion, especially a lot of people in the fandom who are very far from information on what's happening, showing contempt for those that do have information on what's happening, because it's partly just jealousy. They don't have those sources, right? And so I absolutely believe Miss Kennedy's out. And the way you're going to know she's out is the more praise they're lavishing on her, which I predicted as well. Now all you see are, you see people, all articles come out every day how great Kennedy is. Now photos of her on the Indiana Jones, set, right? You didn't see anything of her for 5 years. You didn't see anything of her in Star Wars, right? She just vanished. She vanished after The Last Jedi, right? You didn't see her, doing anything, any press. You didn't come in front of her. Now suddenly, Indiana Jones, all this stuff. This is her swan song. They're like, let's praise her. It's the kiss of death. Keep praising her. Keep praising her. Oh, she's out. She's gone. Thank God. And she's not going to sue us. And she's not going to reveal those photos. She's not going to call a journalist. And she's been paid off to the tune of a lot of money and a lot of praise that average people are going to believe. Like some of these people in the fandom that are creating drama, they're going to believe that narrative because it's on the surface. And all that narrative is done for dumb people who live on the surface, right? People who actually know what's going on know it's fraud.
Do you think it's fair to say that she's been kind of a figurehead of hate? I mean, even if she is removed, even if she does either step down or it's because her contract has come to an end, do you think the rot is so deep in Disney it's not really going to make that much of a difference, especially with Star Wars? Because I always think of Star Wars as Disney's golden goose that they managed to kill.
They killed it, strangled it, right? And they ripped it open. I mean, I think the rot is inside of Lucasfilm. I've been very vocal about that. I have to be careful of that because the last time, every time I talk about Lucasfilm, strange things happened. I said some criticism of Lucasfilm. I got my Twitter banned, right, permanently, and I had to resurrect myself. I start talking about Lucasfilm on a live stream. It shuts down every time I talk about it. Every time I don't mention it. When we say Lucasfilm, a bot comes in and we're done, right? And so we're not live right now, so hopefully this will survive. But yeah, the rot is inside of Lucasfilm. Lucasfilm is the perfect example of these 25-year-old kids who don't know what they're doing, right? Who have this smug thing that they're going to fix what George Lucas, a white male, did, right? And these kids are also very internet savvy, and since they're not doing anything, got a lot of time on their hand to hack things and cause problems and whatever. And so that's what they are. So the rot is Lucasfilm. I do believe that Miss Kennedy is out, and what Miss Kennedy is eventually gone, and with lots of accolades and all that, then Lucasfilm is, I think Lucasfilm is finished now, but once the boss is officially off the lot, right, whether that's October, November, whatever, early next year, whatever it is, when she's officially no longer on the lot, then they're going to get rid of all of those guys, and I think they all know it. That's why they're all gone quiet on Twitter and social media, right? Because they're all looking for jobs right now, and I know they've made a lot of adversaries in this town. I mean, the way Lucasfilm treated major directors like Colin Trevorrow and other people who are very well respected in the industry. Trevorrow is a decent, gracious guy, but I know his team, the people around him, have not forgotten how Lucasfilm mistreated him. And I'm sure there were 25-year-old kids that talked rudely to Colin Trevorrow. They're never going to get another job again, because they're 25 and they're too stupid to know that Trevorrow's people can make one phone call to whatever their next job is, and they're not going to get it. And that happens in this town. The phone call to prevent you from getting a job, that happens. It's happened to me, right? I know for a fact because people tell me, I've been told, like twice I've been told, yeah, you're about to get that, but the boss got a call. Twice. And I get, if somebody's at the company's like, I'm sorry, man, you were the guy for the project, but the boss got a call. And I said, okay, that's how it works.
It really is a cut for the environment. It's incredible.
It's a mafia. It's a mafia. It's hard for people to imagine because most people are good people. They can't imagine people behave this way, but they do.
Oh, I absolutely believe it. It's just it's so far removed from what obviously the average everyday person has to deal with. It's trying to get your head around this fact that
Because it's all about wealth, power, and
you're
sex. The
constantly
average person
looking over
doesn't
your
have those
shoulder.
three things. The average person doesn't have wealth, power, or sex, right? Or they have sex, it's not great sex, right? In Hollywood, you have wealth, power, and sex at a very high level. And that's what screws everything up.
I always say everything in moderation. That's the way I go.
That's all good.
We did have, funnily enough, another question from Mexican Island. It kind of leads into what we've literally just spoken about. His second question, he says, if you were stranded on an island for the next 10 years and all body, beauty, and brains being equal, what's your preference? Redhead, brunette, or blonde?
Is this an appropriate question? I,
I'm
I
all for it.
you know, it's interesting. As anyone who follows my Twitter feed knows, I love all women, right? I just think that they're
Absolutely.
God's beauty, and I'm cool with it, right? I love the brunette for the mystery. I love the blonde for the vivacity, and I love the redhead because the redhead is unique and special. So I think I have a little bit of a thing for redheads, right? And so I'll go with the redhead. If it was an island, let's go with the redhead.
Oh,
Oh,
you
wait,
have
you're a redhead.
excellent taste.
I'm saying this. You're a redhead, so it's great. So you understand. Redheads are special.
Exactly. It's funny, obviously, because I've spoken about it before. I've done shows about it. Hollywood seems to have a massive aversion to redheads, but
Yeah.
everybody I know, it seems to be quite partial to
Well,
redheads.
because it's Hollywood racism, because redheads are perceived as the whitest of the white, right?
Mhm.
That's how they're perceived. And whether that's fair or not, they're perceived as that. And so in a culture right now that believes white people, except for themselves, are evil, they themselves are great, right? They're
Yeah.
white people, great, right? But all the other white people, because it's all being at the top of the pyramid, throw everybody else under the bus, right? So the redheads are seen as the whitest of the white, and they are rejected by people who are rich, powerful, who have redhead mistresses. So they got to play. They got to do the official virtue signature, right? So
I was going to say, I'm sensing a little bit of hypocrisy here, but that's okay. It sounds like it's part and parcel with what goes on in Hollywood,
if there was no
unfortunately.
hypocrisy, there would be no Hollywood. I mean, it wouldn't exist.
They didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Kamran, this has been a fantastic chance to get to finish this conversation with you. Thank you so very much.
Well,
Is
I
there anything
hope.
that you'd like to end with? Is there anything that
Sure. I just, if people, what's great is a lot of people have started reading my books, right? Because that's what I always like to promote, because I'm very proud of my novels, and so people have actually started reading them, and in the fandom they were like, oh, let me just check out his book. Oh, it's a really good book. So I've got 2 books, and they're available at my website, which is my name, KamranPasha.com, or on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, whatever. So one of my novels is they're both historical novels. This is called Mother of the Believers, and it's a historical novel about the birth of Islam from the point of view of the Prophet's wife. So it's a woman's point of view, and I think it's been very well received. People are like, wow, this is a really fascinating story. And the other novel is another historical novel. It's based on one of my very first screenplays called Shadow of the Swords, and it's an epic on the Crusades, and it's told from the point of view of a Jewish woman who's working for Saladin. If you remember from Kingdom of Heaven, Saladin was the Muslim king who fights the Crusades, right? So it's Richard the Lionheart, Saladin, and this Jewish woman that's serving as a sort of a spy in between their camps, right? And so absolutely, hold on, I'm getting sirens, of course.
I think you said too much.
Because they're like, he has said too much, alert. This town is like, why is this guy still here? He's still here. I don't understand why he's still here. So, I'm still here, guys. I'm sorry, it didn't work. So, don't wound what you can't kill.
Well, we are so glad that you are, and can I say just thank you so much for coming back to Twitter, because you brighten our Twitter feeds every day. So it's an absolute honor to have you back.
It's way back. I mean, I'm honored to come back again. I hope I can do a live stream with your chat again. I'll try to be careful of the things that might trigger it, but we'll take that risk.
No risk, no fun. That's what I
That's the
say.
First generation, right? I like to think I'm the first generation of the new Hollywood, right?
Yes.
After coming
we can
in
be the pioneers.
Absolutely. I'm going through the Gemini moment where I'm just like Gemini 8, where I'm just spinning in space trying to survive. So
Thank you so much. And guys, a huge thank you to everyone who joined us on Sunday. And I hope that you've enjoyed the second part of this fantastic interview with Kamran Pasha. It's been an absolute honour to get to chat with him. So thank you very much.
Thank you.